I didn't give a lightning talk. My name is Juan Caballero. I work on standards. You corner me after if you want to know multiple options of where to propose things or what to be paying attention to for all the topics Henri mentioned as CASA. They've got an acronym there. There's a Chain Agnostic Standards Alliance in which Brooklyn and Boris are superstars. And Center.io, they're the USDC people, but that's not what's relevant to this panel. My job at Center is to help with someone asked earlier who's working on getting enterprises to wrap their heads around zero knowledge proofs and other privacy technologies. That's sort of what I do at Center. And DIF, Decentralized Identity Foundation, helps those W3C standards be more digestible to the software industry, basically. I think one sort of like offhand remark that might have slipped a notice came from the audience. I can't remember from who. Someone was asking about how you get people to trust zero knowledge proofs and things that come through circuits. And I definitely think that VCs are not for that. VCs are for the provenance part, which is one of the necessary but insufficient conditions. The last mile problem of how you get subsets of the data to all the people that need to compute it or see part of it is one part of the problem. And I think what else? Yeah, and blockchains are payment rails. That was the other comment I wanted to make.
Please go on with your lightning talk.
No, sorry.
I said to keep it spicy.
Just that blockchains are silos and they centralize things around a payment rail. And I don't know, I guess there are data-only blockchains, but for the most part, when we say blockchain, we really mean a payment rail. We mean a literal VC ecosystem with legs. And all this real-life human stuff, like how enterprises and governments want to deal with meat bags, none of that should be beholden to a payment rail. You should not give a payment rail, even Ethereum. Sorry, I know we're at an Ethereum conference, and I love Ethereum. It's my favorite cult. But you should not cede the remit of governance or government or trust or identity to a blockchain. Or a currency, yeah. Anyways.
An actual walking encyclopedia. If you want to know anything about standards or DIDs or VCs, please corner him, or he'll corner you, actually.
More likely.
So I have a question for anyone who wants to take it. If my thesis today, not the graduate thesis, but what I spoke about is correct, and there is some shared joint project that we're all kind of working on and want to actually coordinate, then how's crypto doing today? How are we doing, guys? Are we on our way? Not a leading question at all.
We've got a really strong start. So the basis of self-custody and self-ownership is the key pair. And we have done a pretty good job of distributing a variety of different flavors and teaching people how to interact with them on a very basic level. But as you noted, the many blockers to adoption, namely usability and accessibility, mean that we don't need a bigger club. We don't need to scale the club, right? Nobody can get in. They're all standing in a line outside. And so in order to do better, we need to prioritize the human part of these human coordination tools. Not only do we need ethical frameworks to minimize the risk and harm we bring to human beings, we need to quit using the word emergence as an excuse for not doing research. And so I think we are too old at this point to be taking advantage of the novelty of discovery when the consequences of what we build will resound through the ages. I think we are at an exciting point where we can find a shared set of principles, of objectives, even just guardrails that we can start thinking about, and we can all independently implement those in our own ways. But we need to build for the person, not the protocol. Right? And we need to meet people where they are in their own journey, not demand that they all start at step 0 of ours.
Anyone else? How are we doing in crypto?
Comparatively to last year, I think we're trending upward. More people are talking about these things and taking them seriously, it feels like. I think the more regulatory pressure there is on the space, the better we will do. So the more Elizabeth Warren talks about crypto, the more likely it is that identity standards will emerge in the space. And so I think, I do think, unfortunately, emergent behavior is like a super powerful force. And there is a fair question to be asked, which is, are the people in this panel, will they be smart or will they be rich? Is it better to be, intellectually correct about these issues or build products that people will use down the line because they are delightful? And we need to find a way for, us to be both, hopefully. But in the interim, there needs to be extraordinarily strong negative pressures around touching user data in order for there to be a good enough incentive for people to coordinate around standardization.
Yeah.
So I would argue that the non-crypto environment is truly helping crypto become better at this, which is nice.
That's nice. Anything to add?
Winter is just a much nicer time.
It is.
In summer, the ethics shit goes right out the window. But in winter, people build things slowly, they build things well, they take their time. There's not too much hiring and firing and churn of colleagues. It's nice. Winter's nice.
Yeah. On the other hand, monsters come out in winter. So what is it you fear the most? Do you ever feel like you're running out of time for your product to take off? And what conditions need to be true in the market for you to find fit?
I'll maybe go first all the time. All right, so I think the odd dynamics of this winter, right, where our build and buy market, are such that we have a moment to pause, to slow down a little bit, but if we look too closely at our chains as the only surfaces of expression, we will prioritize data availability over informed consent. And to the extent that we are continuing to build for human users and not to allow apps to feast and gain traction and delight their VCs, we need also to delight our users. And so I'm concerned about the enthusiasm for composability overtaking our enthusiasm and love for the humans who will benefit from our tools.
And I'm going to lead, sorry, to slightly moonlight. But maybe there is something to be said about VCs and the tension between composability and privacy in them. This is a conversation we've had a few times, which is why I tried to do this. But basically, the verifiable credential standard is a really interesting one because in it, there is, to my knowledge, no fundamental support for encrypted data because the proofs have to be done over data that's available. So this is an example of standards promoting interoperability over privacy. If you encrypt data inside a VC, your proof is no longer valid. So you actually need to add a second layer of proofs, which some of the brilliant people in this room have done.
You want to take this one?
in order to have both.
I do think, but like, so verifiable credentials can be a building block of a system. It can just be how you store your data if you don't want to use the Calem's database. But they are meant to be a sort of a translation layer or portability device. So however you use the data locally, encrypted or unencrypted, the verifiable credentials is supposed to be the format you put everything in that you want everyone to be able to trust as much as if it were on-chain. So it's like it makes off-chain data equivalent to on-chain data in a given use case. And there are a couple technical ways you can do the encryption more natively, but mostly that was a separation of concerns because the verifiable credential working group did not want to get too far into the terrifying academic, what would you call it, like cage fight of delegation standards, which, like some of that stuff's happening in CASA because like we need all align on some harmonize on how we're delegating and how we're handling OCAPs and stuff. But so verifiable credentials, you are right, are better suited to the use case of someone saying, well, who is custodying the actual data and let me see it exactly where it is, prove to me it hasn't been tampered with. Like fully homomorphic encryption or zero knowledge or any sort of compute over partial or encrypted data is assumed to be happening at another layer. So like verifiable credentials are proving nothing's been tampered with to people who subpoena you. It's for the subpoenas. The goal of verifiable credentials is subpoenas. Anyway, sorry. I will stop saying the S word. It's like my favorite word, but it makes, I don't know, it makes you unpopular at crypto conferences.
Evan, you got a
Notarized.
retort?
They're notarized.
They're notarized.
Notarized. Affirmative before there's interrogation.
When the government asks for notarized things, you're like, here, I got them notarized.
Well, and we all need to become very good at interrogating whether or not data is indeed notarized, is appropriate for subpoena. Because if we are to be atomic units, acting independently, floating, from one blockchain to another, that means we have pushed discoverability to the edges. That means we have pushed our knowledge, our ability to discern truth from fiction to the edges if we are not relying on a shared source of truth. So subpoena, notary, source of truth, not tampered with, all of these things basically allow us to entrust off-chain data with the same capabilities or similar capabilities that we might enjoy from a public ledger. And just one sort of note on the encryption layer, I think that is a wonderful callback to what you were talking about earlier in terms of zero-knowledge proofs and the expediency or lack thereof that is a challenge when we play with this stuff on-chain. But I personally delight in predicate disclosure and the ability to leverage off-chain proofs with some of these zero-knowledge capabilities so that we might be able to get to our adventures faster, cheaper, quicker without having to bother with public chain.
So I'm going to pull us out of the DIDs and VCs and SBTs debate just for a little bit. I think the thing that really gets to me is that people forget that Cambridge Analytica wasn't a data breach at all. The 87 million Facebook profiles that were harvested by the analytics company were publicly available because of poorly architected privacy and permissions. Before essentially Facebook had a robust permissions layer, it wasn't a data breach. It wasn't a Yahoo or an Equifax. So we got really mad, and some of us went to Congress and we testified and whatever, and then we decided to go and do it all over again by putting everything on chain. So I am going to pull Philipp out of the silence and give you the bull case on why we want to do Cambridge Analytica on chain again.
Well,
Roger, that's a leading question.
I didn't propose that we put PI on chain. I specifically proposed that we do not put it on chain, that we leave it off chain. Instead, we benefit from on-chain composability because you have a certain set of use cases, applications that are on chain, right? So I think that was the point that I was trying to make earlier, in that you have these applications that inherently exist on chain. I think finance is a great example. You now start to have also social applications and so forth. And I think there is something where to be said about combining both sort of like the off and the on-chain world and bridging that in a way that it is ultimately a delightful user experience, because that's ultimately what matters.
But critically, it's not PII that was in question in Cambridge Analytica. It was metadata. It was likes.
Right.
That's not actually codified as PII.
And I would say, actually, that we are not transposing or repeating. We are augmenting with greater strength and availability. We are creating an even more pernicious and accessible form of Cambridge Analytica when we put this shit on chain, because what we are doing is we are creating an equal opportunity God mode surveillance apparatus that you and Mark Zuckerberg can both enjoy to your heart's delight. And so we are lying to ourselves if we think that Web 2 is not going to take advantage of these freely available databases that they can engage without having to pay for insurance or storage or even participate in the network.
Or hold liability for being sued for what happens when you put a bearer token on chain. I mean, bearer tokens on chain, and I mean, like, if it's opaque enough, sure, and if it's opaque enough, then it is really, I mean, so I want to give props to my old boss at Spruce, Rocco, who used to always call this the last mile problem. So like on-chain use cases, like you want to bring the data as close to the payment rail as possible without dumping it into the payment rail. So like how you get a smart contract without access to Web 2, without access to off-chain data, how you get the important subset of the data to that last little jump in your architecture is a really hard problem. There's a zero-knowledge way of doing it, and there's a trusted intermediary way of doing it. Fundamentally, if you're putting something on-chain, it should either only be useful with zero knowledge or only be useful with the participation of a trusted party. It's like trusted setup, untrusted setup. It's same shit. But like we need, yeah.
I'm going to give this next one to you, actually,
Sorry.
because I want to specify that despite what Evil just said, I don't think SBTs are like the devil's work. I think there are use cases for it. I just think that we got really excited because Vitalik published a thing, and then there's a whole like army of fanboys that are out like, well, I'm going to make an SBT company now, raise money for it. But we haven't figured out access controls and permissions and all that. So my question, and maybe you'll help answer it, is what is the state of permissions and consent in crypto right now?
This was for me or Henry?
For Henry.
So Privy is pivoting to building an SBT company. You heard it here first. No, I think there's a tremendous amount of good work happening. I think Spruce is an enormous sort of power in actually pushing forward standards that are usable and meaningful. I think, I'm going to sort of sidestep the question because I'm probably not smart enough to answer it completely. But the thing I was thinking about earlier is like we can't stop the future. We can maybe shape it, but like these things are going to happen, and I think it is a fair question to ask. Would you rather hand over your data to a single company that monopolizes it, like Facebook, or would you rather hand it over to everybody? So you're probably worse off in privacy terms, but we'll probably get better products out of it. This is a very libertarian view of like, competition begets like good products, but like arguably, since Facebook isn't securing it anyways, at least have other builders build off of it. So I'm making the case for here, like, given a choice between interoperability and privacy, if we can only pick one, I'm just saying it's not so clear to me which one we should pick. With that said, I think there's a tremendous amount of good work. I think things around like signing of Ethereum is really exciting insofar as standard codification is going, but also we have such a long way to go. Signing of Ethereum is like a string format. It's like one step in a like 18-mile journey that we have to take.
It's a bootstrap.
For standards around capabilities delegation, standards around all these things. And so I am really excited to be working in crypto because I think we're doing the hard work of both thinking through the things and building the things. We have folks here like Juan who is thinking at very fundamental levels about how we standardize this, but then we have folks like Evin, and please feel free to put yourself out of the box that I'm about to put you in, who are actually building products that people can use today. And I think the tension between the two and the interplay and the fact that like we're trying to move forward as we go and as we figure it out is really important, because if we don't, then the people who are going to build the stuff we use are the ones who care less.
And the beauty is that people can be two things, Henri. And so in addition to shipping products that people can use, the Disco team also kicks it at the W3C, at Diff. We love the team at CASA because we shill standards, and that's what we build and deploy. And so lastly, I think on the SBT conjecture, which I think is a wonderful conversation starter, that is very true that we cannot stop the tide and development of tools, but what we can decide is to socially enforce some over others. There are a lot of ways to open a wine bottle, but a sword is not the socially accepted standard,
Alas.
right? We sadly, but there are a lot of externalities based on how you choose to execute a task, and some of those externalities, as with over publicizing, being data exhibitionists, making this available publicly, is that we marginalize or we can harm marginalized communities, and we can reinforce those already in power. And so, to the extent that Ethereum is not the only API upon which humanity relies, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to store data there.
So we're just about out of time, but I think I hear her talking about understanding how to make trade-offs, societal trade-offs, not just technical trade-offs. Does that capture it? No? Good.
Sorry, I just want to add in that line about the trade-offs, probably my greatest fear in the space right now is that people forget that they have to pay for things. It's going to be really hard to build sovereign systems if we don't find ways of actually stepping out of the last 10 years of crypto where everything was free because we had new entrants.
Subsidized.
To a place, exactly.
It wasn't free, it was subsidized. VC was paying for it all.
To a place where we remember that we have to pay for space. Storage being decentralized does not make it free. And so, yeah.
That's it, guys. Consider the trade-offs.